Chuck Pullen, how are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you once again for having me on a Monday. I always appreciate it.
What do you do for a living?
I don't know. What don't I do for a living? How about that? So is that meant to be rhetorical or?
No, I mean,
Okay.
What is your job?
I work in broadcast, so I've been basically So here's the thing. So I've been a broadcaster my entire life. Even when I was like a kid, I was always a storyteller. I always enjoyed sort of the news and, hearing stories. Even like when you and I first met, I said, there's so many stories in the region that just aren't getting told. And, there's just so much that we don't talk about. And so that was always sort of my thing, is I always enjoyed being a storyteller or being a journalist. Even when I was a kid, you get me in front of a camera and we'd tell stories. And when I was a kid, we used to make a fake Times newspaper and, stuff like that. So I always enjoyed just sort of being a storyteller. And, sort of one of the things that developed as a kid who used to take apart all of my, grandparents' appliances and telephones is I learned to fix things. And so that's sort of one of those things where here in a place like WJOB, it's good to be able to go on air, but also be able to fix stuff along the way. Right. So
I just did a Zoom. If you're listening to this as a podcast, I just I do a lot of the podcast live right now, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to consider this part of my podcast. Just look up Jim Dedelow if you want to listen again. But I wanted to talk a little bit about you and that last part.
Okay.
That the technology.
Okay.
Just so maybe people can get some of the context of our relationship, how it started, and what you made me do.
Okay.
And ultimately, I'll ask it this way. Why did you make me go into streaming television?
So let me see what date it was. I found it here. Let me see.
Oh.
It was July the 5th, 2009 was the night we met at Hidden Lake Park after the little bridge collapsed after the fireworks show. And I was covering it as a news story, and you came out there, same idea. And for some reason, I recognized you, or I recognized your voice or something. And I walked up and we started talking. And I basically said, hey, there's a lot of stories in the region, and, there's a vacuum right now. There's not local news. We used to have local cable news and things like that. And we have a vacuum. And you were sort of like the last place that had just straight news where you can come and have news and have discussion. But one of the things I told you was, one of the things that I expected to see in the future, and it's been an ongoing fight ever since, is that I expect that in the future, they will start pulling AM radios out of cars, and AM radios will, and like I always say, Lynette's never owned a transistor radio. Her generation wasn't walking around with a boombox or an AM radio or anything like that. And so one of the things I said is I expect that AM radio is going to start to fall out of favor or be less available. It's going to be less ubiquitous, or whatever the term you want to use for it. Like, people aren't going to be carrying around radios like they used to. You've got smartphones, and now they're listening on apps, and they were trying to pull them out of cars. Certain companies are trying to say AM radios are too complicated for the electronics in our cars. We're going to pull them out. So I kind of said, Jim, you need to diversify out of AM radio. This is before you had FM, because I see a future where fewer people have access to AM radios.
That was the beginning. And then we went along for a few years, and I agreed with you. I think we built a WJOB app. We started to do stream online. We weren't streaming online radio at that point. We were just an AM radio station. That's it.
Right.
And now it's FM. Now it's streaming on the TuneIn app. Honestly, I didn't even tell you this, but I think we're finally going to build a WJOB app. We had built one before, but then we gave it to Heartland Sports Network, which is a booming digital streaming network that Chuck kind of pushed me in the beginning, and Sam Michael, and I didn't want to do it, but here we are doing a lot of good for a lot of young athletes being on TV. I get all that. But newspapers got hammered over the last 20 years.
Right.
There's no doubt about it, right? Who gets a newspaper? I don't.
Right. The only guy in my neighborhood that gets one's like 90-something years old.
Okay. And in a weird way, local media in and of itself for 20, 22 years has been getting hammered, right? But not radio. Isn't that weird? Radio still hung around. And right now, I don't know, hundreds of people watch in the morning, hundreds listen online on the TuneIn app, hundreds listen on FM, and then thousands listen on AM. And across America, the local radio stations have still been able to maintain. Why is that?
I think it's that connection. I mean, even when I saw how the newspapers failed at connecting with people through social media, I mean, it was sort of a thing where people in that realm, the newspaper, I remember here, I'm going to tell you that I was thinking about this the other day. I went down to CNN years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I went to Atlanta. I went on the CNN tour. And one of those people, Robin Mead or so, you go on the tour and there's all these video clips and stuff. And one of the journalists said in the clip, she said, journalism is the most noble profession. And I was thinking about this because I'm on a tour and I'm like, I'm going on a tour and the people on this tour are, teachers and firefighters and things like that. And here's a journalist. You sit in an air conditioned booth and read a teleprompter and you're going to tell people that it's the most noble profession. You have the most important job. Do you know what I mean? Like, how condescending is that? It's the same thing with newspaper reporters. This idea that like, I'm going to tell you how it is. And even locally with newspaper reporters, not to get into it, but I've challenged local reporters, come on the air with me. Let's discuss your ideas because I think you're preaching, you're wrong. I love to have it. And they don't want to do that because they want to preach. They don't want to discuss. I love the idea of coming on this radio and saying, hey, here's what I think about this. Call in and tell me why I'm wrong. And that's the whole thing is we want to have dialogue. I want to have a dialogue. I don't want to preach. I hate doing monologues. I hate doing radio by myself. I don't want to be Rush Limbaugh talking for 3 hours straight. I want to have you in. I want to have Bob in. I want to have people I disagree with. I want people to disagree with me on the phones because I think that adds growth. We all grow. We all are better because we don't live in an echo chamber. And I think radio is like one of the few places where think about the diversity of the lineup you have every week here on the radio, the diversity of callers. People always tell me, well, the same guys call. It's like, you don't have a phone? You could call in anytime and call instead of the same, like you're complaining about the same 5 callers. Well, call in and be the 6th, right? I mean, again, it's a great democratic experiment where everybody has access to the airwaves at any time. 845-1100. That's what I love about this radio station.
So I agree with you.
Thank you.
We have done absolutely nothing different from our 103-year past. I learned it from Colby, the principals, when I worked here for him, longtime legendary broadcaster, 40 plus years. And principally, we're just, well, it's not even free speech. I don't even like that term. It's just talk to us. That's all. And then we'll agree, disagree, and then we'll go around and do our things that we do in a day. I mean, anybody who's like, hey, free speech, it's always an agenda. And I get so tired of it. But I think that we weathered 20 years of the downturn of local media and the upturn of digital social media, right? So here we are with a 103-year-old brand. And I'll answer my own question of like, well, why did radio survive and basically newspapers didn't? And I think it's that brand, as you said, that connection. And for whatever reason, people are rediscovering the trusted local brands. And I didn't expect it. I had no idea that's where it was headed. But I think part of that is the noise and the noxiousness of social media. And people want to come back to local media and curated social media. Does that make any sense to you?
It does. But also, did you follow the iHeart story last week? Have you been following this at all?
I followed the Vibe.co got bought by Walmart, which is much more important to us. But no,
it's not. iHeart Media, which, as we know, is one of the biggest groups in radio, is undergoing staffing cuts. They eliminated hundreds of jobs. They don't even know, but basically the move comes as iHeart Media announced a cost-saving plan that is meant to lead to $50 million in annualized cost savings. So basically, iHeart Media slashing positions all over the country. And there's people that are saying, I mean, there are places right now, you have more bodies on these airwaves than in some major markets right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but I'm not paying any of them, as you well know.
Right. Well, Lynette gets paid.
Yeah, well,
Lynette, you're still getting
Lynette and Lori,
right.
and Lori and I don't really get paid. So there's one person that works here. Adriana's kind of got her podcast network. So I understand that Lynette can basically do what several people did a few years ago because of AI. And I did see that article about iHeart cutting all the jobs. Honestly, we did that a long time ago and said, the number one thing you could do is operate at low cost so that you could survive.
Right.
We did that for 22 years. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of people are kind of discovering what the new old way. And this is just about radio. We're not talking about digital TV right now. That's a different podcast segment. So with iHeart doing that, is that they're moving away and saying, oh, well, radio isn't growing like some other media? Or are they saying that, hey, you know what? We have gotten a lot more efficient, a lot more repetitive tasks can be done with AI, and we just don't need as many people to operate our media.
Right. Well,
which one do you think it is?
Well, I think it even goes back to, again, we'll just touch on television for a second, because, you now have people consuming media. You have people watching Joe Rogan that has a staff of, basically one producer. I know there's people behind the scenes, but you talk about like Colbert, when you have hundreds of union technicians, hundreds of people working for you, you have to have big dollars to be able to pay those people. And when you're up against people like Joe Rogan that has a much bigger audience and has one guy working for him, right? I mean, even now we have Lynette running this whole show for us, television, radio, streaming. Lynette's running the whole show behind 5 different computers. So, I mean, again, that's the idea of those, the iHeart or even CBS, Paramount, all those groups, they were so slow for one reason or another to adapt to the changing market. So now they're losing massive amounts of money. The newspapers were no different. The newspapers were printing all this stuff. They're printing, all the, people, what's a Sunday newspaper? Like $5 now? Like nobody's going to pay $5 for a newspaper on the newsstand. You know what I mean? Like that's just insane. Like I can get all of that news 2 days ago for free. Why am I paying you $5?
So let's talk about a technical innovation that you did not bring to me. I mean, I'll just be straight. Chuck and I, from the moment we met in 2009, and Chuck makes this joke, I mean, you're my longest enduring relationship later in life. And we talk almost every day. And a lot of that is you pushing me to build a TV network. We did it. It didn't work how you wanted, news and talk, but it built a sports network.
Right.
And Heartland Sports is viable. And honestly, we can't really handle all the growth. And we'll talk about that in a different one. But Matt Hansen, Adriana, the market people, they all want us to do content creation. They all want us to do regular podcasts like we're doing now, and then micro podcasts. And they all want clips for their social media. And in Chicago, this is a booming industry of content creation.
Right.
Where did this come from?
I mean, again, there was a vacuum. He created a vacuum. Think about like when you used to take the train to trade. What did everybody do every day? Everybody had the paper, right? Everybody had the paper in front of them. Again, like you would read the paper even if you didn't care. You'd read, you go through the whole paper because you paid for it and there's nothing else to do on the train. And now that's gone, and now you need that connection. I mean, I think it goes back to, again, why even when I go back to our relationship, a lot of it was me being selfish, saying, I grew up listening to WJOB. I want to see you succeed at this because I want WJOB to succeed, right? I mean, and that's why I'm here working for free for you, because I enjoy what we have, what JOB was and what it's going to continue to be because of that connection. And so again, people are looking for information, and we can do something like right now with this technology. At any point, somebody can call in and say, hey, there's a truck in the ditch. Hey, something happened in Cherville. We can bring news as it happens. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be 100% accurate, but at least we can get that information out there quickly to the masses. And that's what that's what I always enjoyed about it. Just the idea that we can do things in this room that other people are still trying to figure out.
So in terms of content creation, I hate to use the word podcast or micro podcast, but it's part of it. in terms of content, you're creating content every morning that plays later in the day.
Right.
Goddard tells us a new story. We create it. We talk about it on the air. That's content. So what's the future of content creation? And I have never had this. We've never had this discussion. I want to hear your side.
I was watching a video yesterday about some of the great libraries, like the ancient libraries where these emperors would gather all the information and put them into stone tablets and things like that. You know what I mean? Gathering information and storytelling is as old as humankind, right? I mean, and that's the thing is, even then you had the library of Alexandria, and these libraries would burn and the information would be lost. Like, to me, this is what we do is as old as time, sitting around at a campfire telling stories about, mythical creatures or writing down information on stone tablets. I mean, just storytelling is as old as time, and just being part of that. It's special to me, right? I mean, that's the thing is just having those, there's so many people that I meet in the world. I'm like, there's people every time I meet somebody now and they start telling me a story. I'm like, you need a podcast. Even like we brought Levita in and different people. It's like, there's so many stories out there. Even like you talk about the cow guy, you guys were talking last week about how the cow guy's story, as painful as it is, there's a lot of people out there that are going through things that don't know that they're going through it, or don't know how to deal with it, or don't know. They're like, a lot of people that are going through stuff, they're going through stuff because they don't realize that there's other people that have been through it and understand it and are, you know what I mean? Like we're creating connections for people that need those connections. And that's one of the things I always enjoy about radio is like, we meet people out there and like, man, I'm so glad you talk about this or talk about that, because I feel like nobody else is talking about it. I love that. I love when somebody stops me at the grocery store and says, thank you for talking about this thing. I love that.
So did
I answer any of your questions?
Doesn't matter. I mean, honestly, we don't get, used to, remember when we were putting servers in and we would talk, and I used to make fun of you, and I said,
tinfoil hat.
I'm bringing a tinfoil hat.
And now you're like, oh, it turns out you're right about everything. Just open up my InfoWars shirt while I'm here.
Just ask me what, and I'll tell you, right? So here we are with radio, and let's just talk about radio. And now we're talking about audio in general in terms of podcasts, and then the audio podcasts, they're getting regenerated, and we're getting just as many, if not, we're getting actually more views of podcasts on YouTube than we are of the audio podcasts we were supposed to do in the first place,
right?
And post that on Apple and Spotify. But I don't know. I can't predict where any of this is going. And I just follow what you suggest, Lynette, what Adriana, what the market, what clients tell us. But where do you see radio and audio podcasts going?
I think the biggest issue is just sort of the monetizing it. I mean, how do you make a career out of, that's the thing, is that how does somebody make a career out of being a YouTuber or something like that? Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess that's the problem is it's great to have hyper-focused, again, having like your podcasts, like you have a podcast on grief, you have a podcast on business, you have these hyper-focused podcasts, but how do we monetize that? How do we not even monetize, just keep the lights on to keep providing the content? Even if we do it for free, like there's still an expense involved. So I think ultimately that is the future. I mean, again, this idea that, I pick, instead of me watching, you talked about watching, the Sunday shows or whatever. I've never watched the Sunday shows or the evening news or whatever. I was in near Indianapolis watching the evening news, and all they kept talking about was different festivals and parades, because there's nothing to talk about because there's like no crime in Indianapolis. It's like, here's this festival, here's this festival. Like, that was boring to me. So that's what I'm saying is I think ultimately we are creating hyper-focused content for people that, but again, that's dangerous too, because you can create echo chambers of, hey, far left content, far right content. But like for me, I love the idea of just being able to pick a topic, infrastructure. Like I always enjoy infrastructure podcasts, or, again, history podcasts, like being able to just, hey, I want to hear about history. I don't want to hear about the weather and sports. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, I think that's it. People are going to continue, the growth is going to be there, but it's going to end up being hyper-focused. But then again, how long can I do a podcast on fill in the blank topic before it gets stale? I don't know.
It's odd that you say hyper-focused. We use the term niche. And you're right. I do a podcast called What Makes the Cow Guy Cry. I had no idea where it was going to go. And now people are stopping me in the streets to tell me the story of some tragic incident that happened in their lives, and they're telling it to me in the green bean aisle at Strack and Van Til. Somehow Cow Guy wanted to tell his story about his daughter dying of a heroin overdose and how he went through it. Then Werple, the Hammond councilman, comes in and tells how his son died of a heroin overdose. And then we had Bob Grand, the Republican fundraiser, talk about how his dad was in an accident when he was 10 years old on Ridge Road, and they thought he was dead, and he lived 7 more years. And all of these moments of tragedy and how did people deal with it still are somewhat of a niche.
Well, and here's
right?
the thing, that there is a stigma. Like, even you guys talked about the heroin overdoses, but also fentanyl. I know several people who lost young people due to fentanyl, and we're not really, it's not like AA. You know what I mean? Like, it's not out there where we go to grief counseling for fentanyl overdoses or heroin overdoses. So you are creating this niche for people that are dealing with tragic loss of young people that died, way too soon over just completely tragic circumstances. But now you've given them a place to go help deal with that grief. And now they're going to run into you at Strax. You just give them their card and say, come on down, be on the podcast, because there's plenty of people in the region that have lost people to heroin, fentanyl, et cetera, that they're still trying to process that grief. And now you're giving them an outlet. So, I mean, again, that's a great thing that we're doing.
So when you say the hyper-local, I mean, this isn't conscious thought. Well, let's do this, let's do that. The niche podcast, we did one on Friday, the very first one for the Northwest Indiana Realtors Association. They recognize they want to control. They want first-party content. It was an excellent podcast, but it was just about real estate in Northwest Indiana. And I guess what I'm asking you, and I think you answered it using different terms. It's kind of like everything's its own little niche. Jim Weezer comes on and talks about Democratic politics, not unlike James Carville, giving kind of the same idea. And then Bob Starkey comes on with the Lake County Republican show, and they talk Republican politics. You bring on Lieutenant Governor
Micah Beckwith. We're bringing Rob Kendall to talk about what's going on.
Yeah,
again,
I mean,
like an outside
those
perspective.
Are all niche discussions. So the final question would be, all right, everything's a niche. You're going to listen to these podcasts all day, and news and weather, sports, all kind of mixed in there. And if something big happens, I just go on live. And then is there still a place in a niche world, in a niche podcast world, in a niche radio world, where you have a Spanish language station, you have Polish language, you have a business station, you have an all news station, you have a left wing station, you have a right wing station. Is there still a place for 103-year-old WJOB to have general talk, general news, general sports?
There is, and we're doing it every day. I mean, there are people that don't agree with me that listen. There are people that aren't going to agree with Michelle and Larry tomorrow, and they're going to listen, or Tom or whoever. I mean, so that's the thing, is that, we want to hear, there are still people out there that want to hear other perspectives. There are people in the world that as soon as, there's Trumpsters that as soon as Jim Weezer starts talking, they flip him off. You know what I mean? Metaphorically, probably, or the same way with Bob Starkey. Like, no, I don't want to hear about Republicans. You're all evil Nazis. I'm not going to listen. But there's also people that still want to hear outside perspectives. I don't agree with, again, do I agree with Michelle and Larry on a lot of stuff? No, but I enjoy having Larry on with me and having that stuff out. So I think there's still enough adults in the room. And I think the people that get up early to go work, they want to hear both sides. They want to hear my side on Monday. They want to hear Michelle on Tuesday and Tom on Wednesday. I think there's still enough adults in the room that want to hear other perspectives. They may gripe about it on MX Cartoons and say, oh, Michelle said something. I mean, but they're still listening, right? I mean, that's the thing, is that at least you listen and have discussions. I don't think I'm disappointed by the way that some of the people treat Michelle and Larry on Tuesdays. I think you can just listen. Like, if you don't have anything nice to say, just shut up and listen. But I mean, again, it's like, at least we're having those discussions.
He's Chuck Pullen, and perhaps you saw another side of him that maybe you don't see on Monday mornings when he comes on, and he comes on other times too. But Typically, you've got a topic and you've got something you had to cover, whether it's an accident or any other thing that is going on in the Calumet region. But I could just say it takes a village to be able to continue a 103-year-old radio station. I think we've weathered some pretty rough waters. And for whatever reasons, people are rediscovering the brand. But one of the reasons for survival at the very top of the list has been you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it really, like I said, every once in a while I start thinking about, listening, you always talk about the kid who listened in the back seat. And that was me. And that was me as a kid. I could never have imagined my mother, who always said, you talk a lot. Everybody always say, you talk a lot. Like, well, finally I found my place, and that was helping you keep WJOB, keep the lights on. So I appreciate that, because, that's something that really, it's for those of us that are part of this, it's special, because again, it's part of, it's part of the region. It's something that we grew up listening to, and I hope we can keep the lights on for future generations.
Go to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and type in Jim Dedelow. I kind of took off for a few months of doing my podcast, and this will be the second one I've done on the return. Also, you could go to YouTube and type in WJOB 1230, and you could see what Chuck wears, which is, if you wanted to learn how to not dress professionally, all you would have to do is watch Chuck Pullen on Monday mornings. Thanks for everything you do, Chuck.
Look at the picture of that handsome guy in the background. Tell me he does not look fantastic with his glass of wine in his hand.
Until next time, see you later.